can murder a liberator, but you can't murder liberation. You can murder a revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution. And you can murder a freedom fighter, but you can't murder freedom.
You're tapped in, so let's get right to it. So as we should know by now, each and every one of us, the United States has waged or is waging a tariff war with Canada. Now, I don't know how much sense this makes, but it's something Trump wants to do because Trump is feeling slighted. He feels as though Canada is trying to attack the U.S. in terms of tariffs rather than the other way around. So on Monday, Trump signed 3 proclamations under Section 338 of the Tariff Act of 1930. All right, a Depression era, never before used authority that lets the president impose tariffs up to 50% on countries found to discriminate against American goods. Now, Trump's stated reasons for this was Canada's tariffs rate quotas on U.S. dairy, cheese, are far more restrictive than what it grants the EU. Nearly all Canadian provinces, all but 2, pulled U.S. alcohol off shelves without doing the same to other countries. Canada tariff quotas on U.S. auto imports, which the administration says cut Canadian purchases of U.S. vehicles by 22%, which amounts to $5.6 billion. All right. Now, the administration frames it as leveling the playing field for U.S. cars, alcohol, and dairy products. The tariff hit wine, hockey sticks, cement, furniture, and dairy specifically, and take effect in 30 days, covering roughly $20 billion in annual Canadian imports. Notably, the exemptions spare potash, critical minerals, and most energy products, limiting broader fallout. Now, how Canada is responding to this? Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, said the tariffs violate the USMCA, but that Canada remains open to talks to address outstanding issues. He hasn't announced new retaliation yet. Canada's posture right now is negotiation first rather than immediate escalation. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce called it a regrettable escalation and urged both sides to use the 30-day window to negotiate. So, has Canada retaliated? Not yet. At least that's what they're saying. Not yet, with new tariffs in response to this specific move. But this comes on top of an already ongoing trade war with the U.S. and Canada, one, again, which Trump started, all right? The White House itself notes Canada is one of only 2 countries, along with China, that chose to retaliate against U.S. tariffs rather than negotiate over the past year and a half. And Canada has previously imposed tens of billions of dollars in counter tariffs on U.S. goods, steel, aluminum, and other products. In earlier rounds of this dispute, this has been an ongoing thing. Whether Ottawa hits back again on this latest 50% hike is likely to become clearer as the 30-day window plays out. It's worth checking. You know, it's worth keeping our eye on because as we know, or as we should know, these tariffs are going to hurt both sides, but maybe and probably more our side than theirs. There's no telling again. This is something Trump initiated. He came in hitting everybody. He had this big old board with every country he had planned to hit tariffs with, from anywhere from 25% to 100% and more. You know, China was at first, you know, in the crosshairs of this thing. And for whatever reason, Trump backed down to some extent in terms of tariffs against China. China had threatened to do the same if that was done to them. Now we see United States going up against Canada in this tariff war. How this turns out again is yet to be seen and understood. So we're going to let this thing play out. And as it does, we'll report on it. We'll bring you guys content in regards to this. Now, I have a clip as always, and I want this clip, you know, to help you guys, you know, get a little more context in terms of what's happening. Before we do, as always, please like, share, follow, comment, and subscribe to TAP. You are tapped into the art of political discourse. All right, that being said, let's look and see what they got to say about this, because this is something that we think here at TAP that is going to escalate. Is going to escalate because Trump has this mindset to where it's either his way or the highway. And that's really not how you do business. If there's no negotiation, if the board or the field is not level, then yeah, you can expect for things to get worse. And again, dealing with Donald Trump and how he does things, they'll get worse before they get better. All right, that being said, let's jump in here and let's see what they're talking about. Okay, and this is courtesy of Global News, everybody.
Canada has found itself at the center of a trio of proclamations signed by the American president that aim to further punish a decision to keep retaliating against the Trump administration's tariffs. On Monday, hundreds of exports were slapped with new 50% tariffs, and it impacts almost everything, regardless of previous free trade protections. Our Reggie Cicchini is in Washington with the latest, and he joins us now. All right, Reggie, take us through what we know about these new tariffs and why the White House made the announcement.
And again, those tariffs that United States are saying are really a slap at or in the face of the U.S. in terms of exchange of goods, goods coming in from Canada or goods coming from America to Canada is alcohol, dairy, and automotive parts and things of that nature. And again, that is a big hit to the U.S. in terms of what it exports to Canada,
Right, Miranda. So on a call yesterday with senior administration officials, we were told that this is part of, a bit of anger that's coming out of the White House for what it believes to be discriminatory practices coming out of.
And if you let Trump tell it, everything that's done in terms of how U.S. does things or what they want done, how they want it done, when if it don't go the way they want it to go, then it's, someone's doing some harm to them, to the Trump administration. So they are always looking at any time someone does something to defend their economy, as much as the United States does things to defend is retaliation. That's how Trump labels it. And again, this guy, he acts like a child in most instances. And in this case, he's been very childish.
Canada on three specific sectors: alcohol, auto, and supply management, really focusing in on dairy. And in terms of alcohol, we've seen, all but two provinces remove booze from the shelves of stores. And what it's meant is about $500 million less in American wine and spirits making their way into Canada. So the administration argues that the tariffs that they are using now are meant to try and regain some market share that they believe that they have lost since Canada retaliated. But remember, the tariffs that Canada has put in place were retaliation against tariffs that the Americans put in place at the beginning of Donald Trump's terms, which were ultimately overturned by the Supreme Court, those emergency tariffs. So what we're
U.S.-Canada tariffs, as we know, the way the U.S. goes about doing this is in no way normal. Again, the Supreme Court had to step in and notify Trump that, hey, a lot of what you're doing is just illegal. You can't actually do this, And Trump, he's always searching. He's always looking for a crack, a loophole, something of that nature to get what he wants done in spite of the laws. Here's an administration that does not follow the laws. It creates them as they go, so this is what we're seeing play out. This is what we see or seeing play out.
Seeing here are a 50% tariff on hundreds and hundreds of goods coming out of Canada, everything from down jackets to fishing rods to booze to baking mixes and furniture fittings and synthetic wigs. All of this aimed at trying to take some kind of action against the Canadian government here, because again, the United States argues that there were only two countries on the planet that retaliated against the United States. That was China and Canada, and they believe that this is a way to try and right a wrong that they are continuing to push back against.
And does this have anything to do with the wildfires, Reggie? I know Trump has come out saying he's upset that the smoke has come down into the U.S. and is, it's harming American citizens. Was there any mention of that when these tariffs came out?
No, the White House specifically said that this is not related to any of the forest fires. A senior administration official said that Donald Trump is being presented with options on how to move forward with that, but also noted that when the prime minister was in New Jersey for the FIFA final, that it was not, quote, a working visit, and the topic of tariffs was not brought up against the two. So this is one of those things to watch. The United States is trying to put this 50% tariff in place while at the same time mulling additional actions that it can take against Ottawa.
All right. Now, previously, Reggie, Kuzma exemptions shielded some of the economic threats coming from Trump. Is this a new trade war here?
Well, the White House was very specific to say that this is not a trade war, that this is simply trying to end what it believes to be discriminatory practices.
And they would say it's not, because it would affect, again, the market. You know what I mean? So Trump, he and his advisors, they tend to try to think things through to take some of the bite out of what would happen as a result of these tariff wars. So yeah, they would say that, oh no, it's not a trade war. Don't worry about it, in the hopes, they say this in the hopes of it not affecting the stock market or the economy as a result. So we saw the same behavior, the same type of action or response when it came to the war with Iran and the Strait of Hormuz being an issue. Trump would go in early and say, hey, don't worry about this, then the third. Oh, it's not there. It's going to remain open. But the whole time around, it's like, what is he talking about? So it was his way Trump's way to manipulate the market in that it doesn't become an adverse effect, the Strait of Hormuz issue. Now that I think how they're responding to this Canada and U.S. Tariff war is the same thing. First thing going to come out of his mouth, oh, no, it's not a tariff war. It's not a trade war. When actually it is. It is,
against the United States. But what is remarkable here is that in the past, when we've seen the White House use tariffs to try and go after Canadian exports into the U.S., CUSMA really acted as an umbrella or a shield and protected so many Canadian goods. This time, it is not really kind for kind. It is kind of a blanket tariff that is going on all Canadian goods, even if they are protected by CUSMA. This is resulting in some pushback from Canadian officials and some concern here that this could have a bit of economic damage, not only in Canada, but in the United States as well. It's worth pointing out that CUSMA talks have not formally begun between Canada and the United States, even though we are set to see the U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer meet with Mexican officials this week for a multi-day meeting as they move forward with formalized negotiations. Mexico's new ambassador to the United States has said that he believes CUSMA will actually be finalized this year and that Canada will likely be involved in that. But it is going to be a difficult sell here, given the fact that this measure that some Canadians are saying is punitive coming from the White House is for the first time targeting all of those goods that were once protected.
Yeah, it looks as though Trump, it's a power move. We think that everything Trump is doing to coalesce power, to bring more power to the U.S., to strengthen its position, especially when it comes to negotiations with Canada, as well as Mexico and South America. So all these countries that are in the range of U.S.'s neighborhood, so to speak, are countries that Trump has been targeting since he got into office. So it should come as no surprise that Canada sees this as an attack on its economy as much as it sees it as itself just defending how it protects its economy and how its economy works for that nation. Mexico, the same thing. I don't think that it's going to be as clear cut as that, whether or not Kuzma would protect them or not. We just don't see Mexico succumbing and bowing down that easily. Now, we could be wrong. If that does occur, then there's something else Trump and his administration has on Mexico to make them fold in such a way. Mexico is also upset about tariffs being placed on them by the U.S., and they think unnecessarily, but again, there are reasons why Trump does what he does, especially with Mexico. And he uses often enough the excuse that, hey, we got the cartels over there and you guys aren't doing anything. So because we don't think you're doing enough, we're going to hit you with these tariffs, Trump's actions are sometimes undefinable. You can't explain them. Half time he can't explain them, but that's just how Trump is. And it seems to not be flying well with other countries anymore. It's as if they've grown accustomed to these antics in such a way. They say, okay, well, let's see who blinks first. Let's see who blinks first. And this is what we think is playing out with Canada. And we also tend to think that Mexico is going to go and use that same tactic. Okay, let's see who blinks. Now, negotiations aren't finalized over there in Mexico between Mexico and the U.S. So they're still hammering out issues. But we do not think Mexico's going to fold as easily as the U.S. thinks they will. Their fight specifically right now is with Canada. And again, the United States is quick to say, hey, this is not a trade war. And they have to say that because, again, to not say it, to not try to clarify, verify, and prove that it's not would affect the market. So they're trying to do this thing in such a way to where it doesn't look as if it's being retaliatory, you know?
Well, Reggie, we've seen previous tariffs actually get thrown out by the courts,
Right.
saying that they don't actually have any sort of legal standing. Do these new tariffs have a strong legal standing, or is it the same thing, do you think?
Well, yeah, look, this is Section 338, and it's novel. It has never been used before. It's from tariff laws back in the 1930s, and it is a question as to whether this is ultimately going to result in a legal battle because it's untested. And while it allows for a president to take action of up to 50% for what it believes to be unfair trade practices, it's never been used before. And the White House admitted that on the phone yesterday, suggesting that they've never tried this before. So again, it is a question. It is 30 days from when these proclamations were signed to when it goes in place, so roughly around August 19th. And it's a question as to, number one, does this get caught up in the courts? Or number two, does this kind of 4 weeks time frame allow for negotiations between Washington and Ottawa to try and come to terms with something as the White House really tries to steer Canada back in its direction?
All right, so
you could see this as a mad scramble right now, getting writs ready, getting all the paperwork prepared in case they have to go to the, to SCOTUS to deal with this issue. Again, this is an act that he's trying to bring into play that was written back in 1930, whether or not it have any real teeth. To us, Trump doesn't care about that. They found it in the books. They say, let's use it. Let's see how it pans out. We'll deal with whatever decisions the court makes. If they're against what we want to happen, we'll handle that, but right now, just push it through. Let's see whether or not this thing will stick. Let's throw it against the wall. Let's see if it sticks. That's the Trump way, that's the Trump way. Most of what Donald Trump and his administration does is always called into question because of the validity of what they're trying to attach to a situation. Now, whether or not this thing will work again, we'll know. They have a 30-day window to deal with this. And in that 30 days, we'll see. We'll see if negotiations take place first, like this guy's suggesting, or whether or not this thing actually goes up to the 30 days. And then will some writ or a suit be filed to stop Trump, or to whether or not to stop him or to say, hey, he can do this. We'll see.
what has the response then been from Canadian officials?
Well, I mean, look, Liberals, the Prime Minister, they're saying that this is unjustified, while the Prime Minister also saying that Canada stands ready to carry out new negotiations and talk with the United States. From premiers, though, across the country, they are hitting back at this, arguing that this is going to impact the Canadian economy. They're saying that this is unfair. Right. They're saying that this is really tarnishing what might be the last relationship the United States has with countries.
And yet, on that point, Trump is effectively destroying relationships that have been in place for a very long time with neighboring countries. This is what, again, this is the behavior of the Trump administration, to go in and try to rewrite relationships in terms of who controls them or who's in the lead, of these relationships, whether it's the United States or the partnering country. Some of these countries, like Canada, for instance, isn't in the mindset to where, hey, man, we want to control everything that goes on, that comes in and goes out of Canada, whether you like it or not. That's not their approach. Their approach is, hey, let's negotiate a level playing field. Let's get past all this, this hegemony, pushing and mindset that's coming out of the Trump administration. We're in this community, this neighborhood, so to speak, together. Why not live in it together? But, we're dealing with the Trump administration. They don't see things like that. It's about hegemony, control, power more than anything else. And you either bow to us or we'll run over you. That seems to be the mindset of the Trump administration.
Around the world. Ontario Premier Doug Ford, on the other hand, is saying that now's not the time for negotiations and that there should be kind of a match here, dollar for dollar, in terms of tariffs. And remember, the White House has already taken issue with some of the comments and actions of the Ford government in Ontario. It's not quite clear what is ultimately going to happen here. We know American lawmakers, they were notified of these actions yesterday. It's pretty split on how this is being received in Washington, because remember, this could make things more expensive in the United States as they walk towards midterm elections in November.
All right.
Okay, I tell you what's going to happen here is the fact that it will be the fact that Canada is not going to submit. They're just not. This has been, like I said, since Trump came in office, this has been an ongoing issue, this power structure between the two, where the United States want to have complete hegemony under the Trump administration of all neighboring countries in the region. All right. This is something that they've been pushing since he came back into office. And they're pushing it in such a way where, hey, man, you take it or leave it. And again, if you don't take it, you don't bow, then we're going to run roughshod over you. In fact, Canada could become our 51st state. All right. This is something that he's thrown out there publicly. And so Canada, in its own mind, we think here at TAP is say, hey, this guy is serious. He's actually trying to, run over us or get us in a position where he can weaken our economy and then come in and take over our country. Canada's looking at it in such a way, I think. They're well aware that Trump is belligerent. He seems very belligerent towards the Canadian government and any other in the region. Again, it's his way or the highway, and most countries are countries for the most part who are willing to stand up and fight back against the Trump administration. They are starting to receive harsher penalties, and not just harsher penalties, but also a harsher approach to the relationship, whereas again, the United States is saying, hey, we're in control. There's no even kill here. We're first, you're second. So that's what's happening. And we are willing to wager Canada's not going to fold. Canada also, like the U.S., has things it can do to upset and even cause problems for the American economy. They've shown that. All right. The alcohol being removed from the shelves, the dairy not being allowed in, auto parts, things of that nature. They're saying, hey, man, we're going to do this our way. If you're not willing to negotiate, if you're willing to negotiate, then let's come at the table and sit as equals. Other than that, Canada has taken the gloves off, and it's shown. They're not having this wildness or this mess we see Trump always displaying when it comes to relationships with countries that they've been working with for centuries. All right, tell us what you think about this. All right, will this thing continue? Will this Canada versus U.S. tariff war continue? Will it escalate, or will there be negotiations? And negotiations would more than likely be good for both countries. But again, we're dealing with Donald Trump. Let us know what your thoughts are. Put them in the comments. Until next time, you take care of yourselves and one another.
You can murder a liberator, but you can't murder liberation. You can murder a revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution. And you can murder a freedom fighter, but you can't murder freedom.